learning as opposed to assessment of learning. So it really is truly, I want to know where you are as a student and how you're thinking so that I can move you forward. In your understanding instead of looking at it as more of a summative. So that was our first point. And then our second point, does anybody have any questions? Our second point is on page 136. Do I?
No, I just got to say I agree. I'd actually read that chapter. I read all of them, but I agree with your point.
Thank you. And then our second point is on page 136, looking at unwrapping the standards. And we discussed the importance of unwrapping the standards and really digging in and looking at what exactly the standard expects students to know and be able to do, and really highlighting and the language of the standard itself in terms of the verbs that are used, as well as the nouns. But I think the verbs, especially because that gives you an idea of what the students should be doing or how they should be thinking in terms of the rigor that's expected in the standard. I think, if the standard has the verb use, then that is pretty explicit that they need to be using number lines or using the property of operations. I think if it says understand place value concepts, then that's a little more open-ended, and that calls for a nice discussion among colleagues about what exactly that might look like. I think that's a great opportunity for more open-ended tasks that kids have to reason and make sense of. But I honestly think that sometimes unwrapping the standard, especially before creating a common formative assessment or before even teaching a standard, is crucial because people tend to assume that they understand, I think, sometimes what a standard means without really digging into the standard itself. So that's on page 136. And then our last point was on page 143, which was highlighting the importance of working with principals and helping them or working with them as a math specialist to analyze the formative assessment data, to really look, also at summative assessment data, but to really help the principal and work with the principal as part of the process, because as it says at the bottom of 143, not only is it important for the specialist, the teachers, and the principal to work together, but it's also important for the specialist and the principal to discuss ways to monitor whether the plans that they put in place are effective. And I think considering the fact that the principal is the one that has to deal with evaluation, that they definitely need to go in and understand what it is that they're watching and observing, so that they don't lose credibility with their teachers.
Great job, Krista.
Well, we also have a blue box. We also have a blue box, but if we have time, we'll come back to the blue box at the end if you want. But we were going to look at the blue box at the bottom of page 145 because we really like the don't let the because become a way to offer excuses when you're looking at student data.
All right. So you're saying you're not going to read that because we probably don't have enough time?
Well, I'm thinking because we don't have enough time. Exactly.
Okay. So chapter 10 was about, it was kind of funny because like all of the other ones I feel like have been very knowledgeable and things that I haven't necessarily thought of, different ways of working. But this one was all about how to manage the instructional resources, which is definitely something that if you're going to serve in that capacity would definitely come up, but I didn't even really think about that as being a focus for the chapter. So a few things that we talked about, probably first on page 153 is our blue box, because Brian brought up, it actually came up a few times in the chapter that just because teachers have resources available to them, it doesn't mean that they are actually using them. And as it says here, and even if they are using them, are they using them in all of the different ways that they could be used? So that was our first point. And then on page 155 and 156, it kind of talked about how to make teachers aware of the materials and how they can access them. So we kind of like the idea of, in the blue box on page 155, of the mathematics specialist who just puts things on a cart and brings them to the grade level meeting, knowing what the topic of instruction is, and then that way the specialists and the teachers can explore with those materials and see how they can be used for that unit. The other thing that kind of talked about, just making sure, like Casey has talked about, having manipulatives that weren't necessarily in line with what they needed for her grade level, so just switching them with another grade level that would actually utilize them. We kind of talked about some pros and cons of having like everything together. Obviously a pro would be that the math facilitator would be aware of all of the materials, but then you kind of think about, well, where is it going to be located in the building, and if teachers would actually utilize them if they were going to have to go track down manipulative. And the other thing that we kind of talked about, we didn't talk about the grants or anything that was in the back of the book, but we kind of talked about, back to page 153, having book connections and just making sure that you're, if you have books available in your library that tie in with your mathematics curriculum, are teachers aware of those, and is it obvious for teachers? Do they know where they are, or is that something as the math resource person that you could pull and introduce to the teachers? So that's about it. Anything to add, Brian?
No, I thought you did a good job. You hit on everything that we were, I think that we talked about. We have one more. We have one more.
All right. My group talked about chapter 11. This one was there. So the three main points that we discussed were first that the mathematics specialists, you kind of scaffold the whole program at the school. So the first part of the chapter was kind of about scaffolding teachers and making sure that they understand, if you have a new textbook coming in, they understand that, and they address mathematics along with the content standards, and kind of addressing a balance between of how you help teachers, and then establishing shared goals, and making sure that you look over student work and all the kind of things that the whole book has been going over so far. So that was kind of like the first point in the beginning of the chapter on pages 164 and 165. And then the second point in the middle of the chapter was starting on page 167, and it was all about connecting with parents. It's kind of like the connections, first with teachers and then with parents, and they had some really fantastic ideas about how to connect with parents. One idea was to do something called a theme day, and it's called Be Excited About Mathematics Day, and it's described on pages 168 and 169. And what happens is the mathematics specialist coordinates a special day where parents come into the school, and the parents are invited in, and the specialist first meets with the parents and gives them handouts to kind of say, hey, the teacher of your child is going to present a problem or task, and here's what you could look for. And it could be, they could look for questions or how students were working or different things to notice to give them something to do. And then they go into the classroom and they watch the lesson, and then they kind of go back to the specialist and kind of debrief what they saw. And my group actually, we spent a lot of time talking about the logistics of that. So we were thinking maybe instead of having all the parents come on one day, do the parking and things, maybe have like a day for fifth grade parents to come in, a day for kindergarten, each grade level a different day. That way if you have kids in different grade levels, you can still see both of their students doing work in their classrooms. So instead of it being after school, it would be during the school day. And then they also gave information about connecting with parents via mathematics nights. And for that second point, that's where we got our little blue box quote. And it's on page 170, and the quote says, use family nights to showcase engaging math aligned with standards. At my school, we focus family nights activities on ways to keep mathematics learning centered on student understanding through the use of games and activities. But by labeling the tasks and providing a handout with the website reference, I was able to introduce appearance to new mathematics standards required by our state curriculum, while at the same time promoting the importance of our goal of teaching and understanding. So kind of the idea behind the math night in the evening is to use activities and games to still learning mathematics, but of course
take a look for a minute and see what you think.